Hello again to another English language interview here at Vida Digital. Today we're joined by Dr. Tim Cooley. He's the president and CEO of DynamX Consulting. He's a retired U.S. Air Force lieutenant colonel and a pioneer of using modeling and simulation economics to guide high stakes decisions for the DoD and the industry. He's got a PhD in computer science, biomedical engineering from Rutgers, and 2 decades on the faculty of the U.S. Air Force Academy, including a stint as its modeling and simulation chair. Dr. Cooley's work on measuring return on investment for complex tech programs is considered a benchmark in the field. And the timing couldn't be better. On July 1st, the U.S. Senate stripped a 10-year federal moratorium on state level AI laws from the GOP megabill, opening the door to more than 1,000 state bills that had been on ice. We'll unpack what that means for consumers, businesses, and the global talent map. So, to start, and thank you again, Dr. Cooley, for being with us today. What in plain English did the Senate just do about AI? And why does it matter more than the average headline reader might think?
Essentially, they opened up the states to do all their own regulations. And on the surface, perhaps some people will go, well, that's not bad. States should regulate it. The problem comes in my opinion, anyways, the problem comes in that companies or industry that wants to do something in AI are going to go to the state where they can find the least amount of regulations or the regulations that work for them. And because there's no federal right now guidelines, and they're looking at industry to self-regulate, which historically maybe not so great. There's no federal guidelines; they can do whatever they want, and so it's no different than lots of other things, right? We go and live, well, looking at retiring, perhaps we go and retire to a state that has the best tax laws for retirement, and they vary across the board if you ever looked at them. Companies will do the same thing. It's no different also as incorporation. Companies incorporate in Delaware because they have the least amount of restrictions, and now Texas has become one of the famous or favorites, I should say. So I think that's what this is going to drive. What it essentially did, in my opinion, is opened up the AI regulation to be the Wild West, and with no kind of central theme or central railings on it or ramps on it.
Now, in that regard, Wild West would be one extreme. Do you see us, or do you see the US and maybe its allies also becoming small fiefdoms or like little nation states or something akin to? I mean, for me, it comes to mind how state regulations in Germany are pretty different from Berlin, say, to any other of the states that conform the German Union and so on. So if you want to open up a business in one place and then you try somewhere else, you have to have another set of compliance regulations and rules and bureaucracy and so on. Do you see it at any point also hindering, perhaps more than the usual, the growth and the investment of these companies, especially if they want to have more than one like headquarters?
I mean, that's always the argument against regulation, right? It's going to hinder innovation, and it can. But we have to be a little bit careful with AI. AI is very powerful, and there's a lot of people out there that don't understand what AI can do and what it can't do. So AI is highly dependent upon your training set. If your training set is good and robust, then your AI will be good, but that doesn't mean it's not going to make mistakes. And I think if you do a search online now, it will come up with, depending on what your search engine is and how you do it, but it will come up with an AI summary, right? And on the bottom, it always says, AI may be prone to errors or may have errors in it. So, okay. So my point being on that is, yeah, is it going to be these little fiefdoms? It's going to be situations where companies are going to try to go to states that are more favorable. But if you're a big company, even like Palantir, one of the leaders in AI right now, they're a pretty good sized company. Now, they're not going to move their headquarters willy-nilly just to go to a state and then, 2 years later have that state change their regulations. So they're going to try to adapt to wherever they are. And could that hinder their innovation? Certainly could. Interestingly enough, and I won't go into all the details, and I don't have a lot of the details, but I do know that UK has different AI regulations than the EU. And so I haven't done the research to say what companies are positioning differently, if there are any, but I suspect there will be.
Now, to everyday US consumers, or for example, consumers here in Panama, where I'm from, or elsewhere in the world, what concrete changes might one feel first regarding pricing, availability, your data rights?
I mean, certainly there could be some data right issues. I don't know if that affects the standard consumer, frankly. But I don't know if there's going to be difference in pricing, because frankly, companies again are going to try to price based upon what the market can bear. And I don't know how much the consumer is going to see, with the exception of this. And that is, are you going to see AI that is not as good is a bad word necessarily, but not as accurate? Are you going to see AIs that are less than accurate and less than efficient? And how is that going to affect your tools that you use? I don't know how that's going to play out. Obviously, we're only within, what are we in, month 3 of this? And again, I haven't done the research on, you're right, there were like 1,000 bills that all of a sudden got unleashed. I haven't done the research to see how many of those are actually passed. Of course, it's summer. A lot of states are in recess. I think the next 4 months, September through December here, are going to be very telling as to what this is going to look like. Or are states themselves going to say, well, we're going to look to what other states are doing and kind of self-level? I don't know the answer to that one.
Now, one of the things that we as consumers are used to when doing something as simple as you mentioned, like a Google search or a search engine search, is that you're going to get different results that I'm going to get, because your geography is different, your demographics are different, and so on. Would this kind of patchwork AI regulation situation create an environment where the results that you get from using AI tools will be different from the results that I get from the same AI tools?
It could. I don't know, is this going to change much in that aspect? Obviously, if you're doing a search on, well, phone or computer, whatever, your location is known. You pretty much aren't going to go anywhere because you're tied into MAC addresses, IP addresses, all those kinds of things. So they know your location, and they're going to tailor that to that. Now, VPN, of course, can confuse that if you use a VPN, which most of us do. Somehow, however, I can do a Google search on restaurants near me, and it automatically tells me where there are. So VPN is maybe not as good as we think it is in some cases. But here's the thing. Is it going to go to the laws of the state you are in? Is your search going to do that? No, it's going to go to by where the laws are of who owns that AI tool. And so you may get the same results that I do if you're in the same spot. Or if you use a different tool that's owned by a different company or produced by a different company that's in a different state with different regulations, you may get more robust answers or more inaccurate answers. But chances are they will be different.
So it's not like we risk having digital border walls where AI models or certain features geofence themselves to certain states?
I don't think so. I mean, it could do that, but it's not going to be how you think it might be. It's not going to be because I'm in Wyoming, I'm going to be bound by their laws. You're going to be bound by the laws of wherever the company that produced it, which might be Delaware, might be Maryland, might be Florida. That's going to be the laws. And it's going to be very interesting, of course, as it always is. Let's narrow down to the United States, and in a minute I'll go to international. But how is that going to be affected? Because you're crossing state boundaries very, very easily. And anything in the digital world is really, it's really global. But so how are those laws going to impact those kinds of things? And can they even take into account that? So, and let's look internationally. Um, you in Panama do a Google search, and it's probably a Google Panama search engine. But is there a way that you could do the US Google search engine, or can I do the China Google search engine? Um, and therefore get different results, even though you're sitting in Panama. I don't think there's a way. I mean, there are ways they can stop you from doing that, I suppose. But I think there's ways around that pretty much all the time.
Now, you mentioned, for example, companies like Palantir might not be too keen on moving their headquarters because they're just, the 800,000 pound gorilla in that regard. But what about R&D? Could we, through this kind of fragmentation, push some of these US firms, especially the larger ones, to move their R&D or certain parts of the business offshore, accelerating brain drain in some way? Or could it create niches where the US stays ahead because it has stricter guardrails?
I will tell you that pushing R&D offshore is a very easy thing to do. I heard the other day, and I have some ties to some fairly top-notch research centers. Because of the defunding of some grants from NIH, they are pushing their R&D to other sources, which are offshore for the United States, so other countries. And not only that, they are preparing right now, as we speak, to send scientists over there. And it's not a permanent location, but a 6 to 9 month rotation, they're calling it. And I think that's just as a test until they figure out what the lay of the land is going to be and where the money's going to come back, if it's not going to come back, or so forth. But as a scientist, and some of the people that I work with who are more on the biological and medical side, they are very passionate about their research. And so if you're going to tell them that they can't do the research in the United States, they'll figure it out. They're not dumb people, and they have some resources and they have some backing, and they'll go to another country.
In the words of Jeff Goldblum, life finds a way. Now,
Right.
the tariff situation made uncertainty a part of, global commerce and still does right now. Do you see this balkanization of AI in the US, at least from the point of view of places like Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia? Does this also export uncertainty, or does it help by encouraging investment in jurisdictions with clearer, more harmonized rules?
That's a really good question. And here's the problem. I honestly, I'll be honest with you, I don't keep up with all the tariff changes because I could spend all my day doing that. And so I don't know what the tariff laws are currently on software. Originally, they were very lax, very much less. They made today, we're now at the beginning of a new month, so all bets are off. They may be harder, but as long as the tariffs aren't terribly restrictive, I don't know if that's going to play a big factor. And I'm sorry, the last part of your question was
Basically, do you think that just like the tariff situation made it uncertain for everyone regarding e-commerce, do you see any way that this balkanization, this splintering of AI regulations will either discourage companies outside the US from investing within the US, or companies in the US would feel encouraged to take their business elsewhere, basically, and just start in other places with clearer, more harmonized rules regarding AI?
I mean, you're talking the main impact of this is going to be the R&D world. And certainly, my opinion, haven't seen any data on it yet. My opinion is that you're going to see some pullback in investments until the dust settles. Because here's the thing, I'm an outside investor, and let's just, not that I plug them necessarily, but they're close to me. I live in Massachusetts. MIT. I'm an outside country and I want to invest in AI R&D and I'm going to invest in MIT. I might hold back for a few months to see what Massachusetts is going to do because I don't want my investment not to yield a really good ROI. Similarly, in the country itself, I think companies are going to look and say, let's just hold out. I don't want to put a bunch of money onto a project that 6 months down the road I find out I'm gonna have to kill because regulation. So, I'm not going to invest multi-millions in something that's going to be totally unfruitful.
Now, I've often heard that some people think history repeats itself. Others, I like the George Lucas version. It doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Do you see any historical analogs from either the aerospace industry or the biotech industry that you could point to about how this affects graduate researchers, senior engineers, and their basic life choices? Where are they going to live and work in the next couple of months to couple of years because of this U.S. regulation splinter?
I don't have a lot of background in that. I have a little bit, and that little bit goes back now 25 to 30 years. So almost essentially a generation. And at that time, there were people that I was in grad school with, again, on the biological side, who were looking at research that wouldn't be funded in certain states and certain areas. And so they certainly were picking and choosing either labs or, in some cases, countries. I went to school with a lot of foreign students. And so thinking about going back to their home country or a different country, but because they could do the research that they wanted to do that wouldn't be allowed in the United States, or in a certain state. So yes, I look at that and I go, there's certainly a parallel. It's just, you never know what's going to happen, whether it's going to play out the same way or not. Because I don't think we're anywhere near as stable in this world as we were in the bio world back in those days.
Now, what do you think the playbook should be for businesses? You mentioned, for example, a lot of businesses are going to probably hold off on investing or making the next move until the dust settles from all of this. But if you were right now in a mid-market firm piloting Gen AI, what would the next steps look like regarding policy and governance and so on?
If it were me, if I was the CEO of a mid-level AI firm, I would be lobbying Congress to do some federal regulations. And don't get me wrong, there may be some regulation of that that's not necessarily good for innovation, but stabilization is the best thing. If I know what's going to look like across the board, and I can be somewhat assured it's going to be that way for at least 12 to 15 months, then my life is much easier. And the second thing I would do is, again, you want to put money into your research. So what can you do that can reasonably be applied even if things have to change? And I'll give you another example. I had a cousin who's a PhD out of Harvard. She got 6 months from her dissertation defense. Somebody published a paper that her committee deemed was close enough to her research so she could not continue that exact thread. And so she had to back up about 8 months and redo, and it cost her a little bit over a year of time. I would be looking at those areas where if I couldn't go down a certain path, I could back up and still not lose everything. So what can I do? What research can I do that A, shouldn't be regulated, or B, if the exact thread was regulated, I can back up and go in a different direction. And the third thing I would do is I would be talking to my state representatives and state senators and find out what's on the table. Where do they think it's going to go? Again, intel is extremely important when you're talking about investments. And I'm sure all of them are doing well. I shouldn't say I'm sure all of them. They should be.
That being said, you mentioned the possibility of lobbying the federal government to have some sort of level playing field. But if you had to go to the state lawmakers, what advice would you give them? What kind of practical actions could they take right now to minimize the chaos, preferably if it costs them less than a rounding error in the budget?
Yeah, another great question. I think the best the best laws which will help regulate AI and not get your errors and your inefficiencies as much is laws on the kind of data you're using to train AI, how you're doing that training, what's acceptable in the way of, because obviously you don't train to 100%. There's nothing that does that. What is acceptable? Is 98% acceptable, or does that have to be 99.5? Give me some idea of what that's going to look like so I can better position myself later on. Um, the other side of that is the use of AI, and are there guardrails you can build in? And so I don't know if you heard, or well, this morning it came out, not that this happened this morning, but the lawsuit came out this morning of the parents that are suing, I think it's in California, because their child committed suicide using ChatGPT as um, advice. And so I think there needs to be some policies and some regulations that say, hey, there's some things you should not build into a ChatGPT, or have a guardrail so that you can't go down that way. It doesn't do those searches. Um, and so, but those seem to me to be kind of not as impactful as some of the other things. As far as a company, I can put guardrails up easier than I can do some of the other things as to how I build my tools. Um, so
That's really interesting. I had not heard about that. I'm definitely going to look into it, and I think it's a great topic to talk about, because a lot of people are actually using Gen AI tools for a lot of things like advice that definitely should be in the hands of mental health professionals. So it's something to definitely look into. Dr. Cooley, I'm really thankful for the time we've spent today translating all of this legislative sausage making into actionable insight. And for our listeners and those of you watching on our YouTube channel, Spotify, and so on, if this episode helped clarify the AI policy maze, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share the conversation so more people can make informed tech decisions. And talk to your local lawmakers. It's really important to be more participative, I think is the word. Stay tuned for our next deep dive, and thank you for spending the time here. If you've made it all the way to the end of the video, I'm really thankful for everything, sharing and liking and so on, because we really want to make more of this content available to everyone. Thank you, Dr. Cooley, again for joining us today. If they want to get in
thank
touch
you.
with you, can they follow you on social media? Can they read what you write? Well, what would be the best way to get in touch with you?
I have a website that's being redone as we speak. The old one out there is old, um, which is www.dynamix, D-Y-N as in Nancy, A as in Alpha, M as in Michael, X as in X-ray, .org. I'm also on LinkedIn. And if they really have a question, they can email me, which you can find on my website. So
Great. We'll be sure to do that. And hopefully we'll talk again next time, maybe discuss some more AI legislation coming our way. So thank you again.
thank you.